Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Art of Creation Homestead. I'm out here in my backyard, and we're going to talk about some more chickens. All right, it's a topic that I love to talk about. But honestly, you know what? We don't know everything, and 8 years ago, we really didn't know everything. You see, we started this thing off with 18 chickens. All right, and we had 2 roosters and 16 hens that we bought, which obviously they weren't full grown then. But we bought 18 total chickens, and right now we have 17, I think. But over the years we've learned a lot about them, and we've changed our process a lot. It wasn't that we were stupid then, but some things you only learn by experience. Bella, you gonna jump? You gonna jump, Bella? So what I want to talk to you today about is not necessarily mistakes. Some of them were mistakes, but just things that we would do differently if we were starting our backyard chickens right now. Now again, some of these things I want to talk about are things that maybe we could have done differently, we should have done differently. The last one is just a flat out mistake. Okay, the first thing I'm going to tell you is I would have made this thing more secure to start with. See, we started out putting hardware cloth on the bottom and chicken wire at the top, and that does fine. But there's other things that we really need to think about. Need a good barrel lock, which is good. That part we got correct. But the windows on the side here probably could have used a little work. This right here, these are sheet metal screws that have a good built-in washer type thing. Take those and put them on your hardware cloth for your windows. Here, 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 here. You see, when we first started, we only had 1 layer of hardware cloth on the inside, and we used a cheap staple to put it in, and it wasn't that secure. It did okay, did its job, but it could be better, right? It could be better using a double thick hardware cloth, one on the inside and one on the outside, and those sheet metal screws makes it a heck of a lot more secure, because you don't want raccoons or any other kind of varmint critter to get a wild hair and decide they can figure out how to get in there and rip that thing apart and get in. Those sheet metal screws does the job. Now, we've never had a predator attack on our chicken coop, and that's one of the reasons why. We did find out we had a raccoon problem years ago by coming outside and seeing our corn all pulled down in the garden. That's why we have an electric fence around the garden now. But also, when we realized we had a raccoon problem, we said, okay, we got to fortify this chicken coop. And then we started doing our research to figure out exactly what we could do. That was one of the big ones. All your windows need to have double thick hardware cloth and a good secure screw down mechanism on them to keep them from being able to get ripped off. Something else we do differently is our roost and our nest box heights. See, we put our roost down low like this, and our nest box is up here. So the nest box is higher than the roost point. Chickens naturally want to roost at the highest point, and so instead of roosting on the roost, they want to get up here on top of the boxes. Creates a little bit of a mess, as you can see, and we scrape that off every day, okay? But every night and every afternoon, or every morning and every afternoon, we scrape that off. But they got established to roosting on top of these boxes because it's the highest point they can get to. And so now it's really hard to break them from that, and they're so accustomed to where everything is, to change it around would mess with them too much, so we have to leave it. We're just stuck with it now, dealing with the circumstances. If we could do it over, I would put a tiered roost right here, okay? Kind of 3 tiers going up, and the nest box a little bit lower over here. That would really establish the roosting point back there, where it's a better spot for them to roost at. But it's okay the way it is. It's just, if I could do it over again, that's what I'd do differently. Another thing we do differently we wouldn't buy roosters. Honestly, we bought 1 rooster, and McMurray Hatchery gave us another one. If they tell you you're gonna get a free chicken, don't think it's gonna be a hen. It's not. It's gonna be a rooster. It's just the way it works. But anyways, so we don't need a rooster. We're not hatching eggs, we're not breeding chickens, and they're totally protected. And a rooster, by the way, is very rarely going to be able to fight off a predator anyways. He might give us life, but other than that, he's not really going to do much for you. We wouldn't have a rooster now if we knew then what we know now, okay? Because that rooster was a big, massive Jersey black giant, and he was violent, okay? When we got into his first breeding season, he became violent. Angela's 5'2", I'm 6'3". That rooster could have jumped and flogged her in the face, to be honest with you, and it would have been a disaster. And she wasn't as good with the chickens as she is now, and so she became scared of him, where now she'd have cooked him. But we don't need it. He became such a problem that he took the joy out of us having chickens, and because he was such a disaster. Now I don't work far from here, so I could come home at lunch and do some quick work, like if they needed some food or water or get the eggs. I can get in there and take care of that myself when he was here, but it was a major issue that was unnecessary. So if we had it to do over, we would not have a rooster in our backyard flock. Now, roosters do serve a purpose. If you're breeding, we're not doing that. So there's not necessary. It's just not necessary for our setup, and not necessary for most backyard setups in reality. Another thing we do differently is this roof right here. See this? I added that later. I would probably rather have it extended out a little bit more this way. It's good to have a good covered run, because they need shelter. They need to be able to get out some, even in the rain, and have shelter from that rain and from the snow and from whatever else. It's good for the shelter. They need that shelter, but they also need more space. So the shelter coming out a little bit further, maybe not the whole way, but a little bit further to give them more protection, and probably done the roof a little bit better, because that roof was an afterthought, much later. So it could be done better. It's fine the way it is. It could be done better, but that roof right there for sure is something I would do differently. Another thing would be the feed. If we could do it, if we could have done it differently to start with. Our feed wasn't the greatest, as we've well documented. It was cheap feed, but also that's what we could afford, to be honest with you. It's the feed we use now isn't still really affordable, but we can handle it. And but we use New Country Organics now, in case you're watching this for the first time. But it's an expensive feed, and we can handle it more easily, but not really, obviously. But I mean, the feed is something we would do differently, because the feed that we had honestly harmed them. We didn't know it was harming them, but until much later, we realized, hey, they could do better. So we would probably try to source a better feed faster than what we did, but for sure the feed is something we would probably do a little bit differently at the start if we could have. And on that note, when we first started, we gave them too much protein too often, okay? And that's something that's very, very real. A lot of times you think, oh, okay, chickens love the mealworms, we don't give them mealworms, make them happy, and maybe they'll lay bigger eggs, because mealworms are full of protein. It's true, they do love them. They don't need them as often as we was giving to them. We was giving them mealworms probably 3 or 4 times a week in the mornings. We'd find some cheap mealworms on Amazon, buy like a 5-pound bag of them, and use it as a treat in the mornings. And sure, they love it. It wasn't good for them. Okay, that was too much protein. Protein needs to be more well balanced. It needs to be 18% or less of their total diet, and that much protein is probably too much. And honestly, just like with the human, it's going to stop up their system, right? And so they weren't as healthy then. And it sounds great, but it doesn't equate to a healthy chicken, to be honest with you. And healthy chickens are the ones who lay the better eggs, more eggs, okay? And so we would have handled the mealworm situation, the protein situation differently as well, and don't give it to them as often. Honestly, once a week or maybe twice a week, and smaller amounts is plenty, and it's honestly cheaper on you too. Now, another thing that we do differently now than what we did when we first started is we give them supervised free range every evening that we possibly can. Now, obviously, if it's raining or there's snow on the ground, or if it's just ridiculously cold, it may not happen. Obviously, rain and snow doesn't happen, but we love to get them out in the yard, and they love to be out in the yard instead of being out in this coop all day. The last 10 to 20 minutes of the evening, they get out into the yard, and they're much happier that way. They get to forage, they get some grass, they get to run, explore, you know, do things like that, and they love it. And they're happier doing that, and happier chicken's a healthy chicken. Healthy chickens are more productive chickens, okay? So that's one thing that we would certainly do differently from the start than we do now, but we do it now, and honestly, our chickens are much better for it. And the last thing is the #1 mistake, okay? This was an absolute mistake that we started out with. Hey, pretty girl. Hey, Lily. See all this pine shavings that are breaking down and is dry and can be scratched around in. Didn't used to be that way. We used straw inside of our chicken coop. This was all straw before, every bit of it. We used to buy the compressed belled bagged straw at Tractor Supply, and it's fine. It does it whatever, but it doesn't absorb well. Okay, it does okay. It doesn't break down as easily. It doesn't keep your coop as dry. And when it gets out in the run, it's an absolute disaster, to be honest with you. See, when the straw would get out here, it wouldn't be like this. It might be at first, but it would get wet, press down, and harden, okay, and it would create this nasty layer. Okay, so it was like a hard layer that would dry. But if you peeled that layer back, it was disgusting. Okay, it wasn't breaking down. It was full of ammonia, which is, by the way, it's in their chicken. It's in the chicken poop. But it was breeding bacteria and nastiness and disease and filth. It was nasty. It was horrible. It was a tough job to go back and redo what we had messed up. But we messed up, and we had to own that messing up, right? And we had to make it right. So in order to make it right, you got to take all the junk out. And that's what we did, and we're so much better for it. Because now what we have is we have pine shavings in the coop, and when that's done, those pine shavings come out into the run, okay? And the pine shavings are in the run right here, they get pulled this way. And now the pine shavings that were out here, they get pulled out, and they're taken. We can now mulch our beds, put it in the garden. Use it to continue to compost more in. So we have product that's more usable now, because that straw was not usable. Okay, the straw was just nasty and terrible, and it didn't break down. It didn't do what we needed it to do. And it wasn't good for the chickens, and it wasn't good for us. And also that straw, they'll start trying to eat it, and it can get down and impact their crops. They can have beller's twine in it, and they'll eat that beller's twine and get down and impact their crops and kill them. Okay, so I'm very passionate about this part, because it was such a bad mistake. It was such a bad mistake that people make all the time, and you're much better off using pine shavings in your coop and pull those pine shavings out and put them in your run, and they've got a dry surface that they won't get muddy feet in. Even when it gets wet, it's absorbing the water, and they don't get muddy feet that way. You get cleaner eggs that way, okay? And now we have pine shavings in here instead of straw, and you get cleaner eggs. That for sure is our biggest mistake we've ever made with the chickens, and it's also the biggest mistake people typically make with chickens. It's okay. We had to learn that it was okay that we made that mistake, because we fixed it, and it's okay if you've made that mistake, but you can fix it. All right, that is the biggest thing. Now look how happy they are. Scratching, digging holes. It's wonderful. But that's it. That's all the mistakes, or just things we would do differently if we knew then what we know now with our backyard chickens. So thank y'all for watching. We do appreciate it. If you have questions about your backyard chickens or raising your chickens, things that maybe you've messed up on, or how can you fix a certain thing, ask us. I love it. I can talk all day about it, really. But thank y'all for watching. We do appreciate it. My name is Jason. This is Art of Creation Homestead. We love y'all. God bless you, and goodbye.